Vyra sat alone by the old stone wall every single morning. It had been that way since her very first day at Greenfield Academy. She would arrive early, find her spot at the far edge of the courtyard, and sit down before the other children came rushing in. It was easier that way. If she was already sitting when they arrived, she did not have to watch them move away from her. She did not have to see the moment they decided she was not worth standing near. She was a dragon girl. The only one in the whole school. Her scales were a deep, dusty green, the kind that should have shimmered like a forest in sunlight. But they had not shimmered in a long time. They were flat and dull now, the way a fire looks when it is almost out. Her wings were small and folded tight against her back, always tucked in, always trying to take up as little space as possible. Even her tail, which should have curled proudly behind her, stayed low and still against the ground. She had learned to make herself small. Not in body, but in every other way. The elf children said her skin looked like old rock. The dwarf boys once dared each other to touch her scales and then ran away laughing when one of them actually did. The beastkin girls were not cruel, not exactly, but they had their own circles and their own games and they simply never thought to open them up for her. Nobody was mean enough to get in trouble. They were just quietly, consistently, perfectly indifferent. And somehow that was worse. Vyra had stopped asking to join games in her second week. She had stopped standing near groups in her third. By the time a full month had passed, she had built herself a small and careful routine. Arrive early. Sit by the wall. Draw in the dirt. Wait for class. Repeat. She was drawing that morning when the gate opened and a boy she had never seen before walked in. He was human. She could tell right away. No pointed ears, no fur, no scales, no tusks. Just a plain human boy with brown hair that stuck up on one side, a dark green jacket that was slightly too big for him, and a worn leather satchel hanging off one shoulder. He looked around the courtyard with calm, easy eyes, like he was simply taking it all in. Not nervous. Not trying to impress anyone. Just looking. Their teacher, Ms. Lena, walked beside him and spoke quietly, pointing out different parts of the school. The boy nodded along and smiled politely. A few children glanced over with curiosity. Some of the elf girls whispered to each other. The dwarf boys sized him up and then went back to their game. The boy's name, Vyra would later learn, was Sam. Ms. Lena finished the tour near the center of the yard and then was called away by another teacher. Sam was left standing on his own. He looked around again, slower this time. His eyes moved across the groups of children, the games already in progress, the clusters of friends catching up after the morning. He watched all of it without any particular hurry. Then his eyes landed on Vyra. She looked down quickly. She pulled her claw through the dirt and pretended to be very focused on the shape she was drawing. It was a circle. It was not a very interesting circle. She drew it again anyway. She heard footsteps. They did not stop at the center of the yard. They did not head toward the dwarf boys or the elf girls or the beastkin group near the fountain. They came closer. And closer. And then Sam sat down beside her on the ground. Not nearby. Right beside her. Close enough that his jacket sleeve was almost touching her folded wing. Vyra went very still. She did not look up. She kept her eyes on the dirt and waited for whatever came next. Maybe he had not noticed what she was. Maybe when he looked over properly he would get up and move without a word, the way some children did. She had learned not to look. It was easier that way. But he did not move. After a moment, he spoke. "What are you drawing?" His voice was easy and relaxed, like he asked dragons questions every day of his life. Vyra looked up slowly. He was watching her with simple, open curiosity. No nervousness. No forced politeness. Just a genuine question from someone who actually wanted to know. A circle, she said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. He looked at the dirt. You've drawn it about 6 times. She looked down. She had. She did not have a good answer for that. I do that too, Sam said. When I'm bored or thinking about something. I draw the same thing over and over. He picked up a small stick from the ground beside him and drew a lopsided square in the dirt next to her circle. That's mine. Not very good either. Vyra stared at the square. Then, very carefully, she looked at him again. He was not looking at her scales. He was not looking at her claws or her wings or the faint curl of smoke that sometimes came from her nose when she was feeling something strongly. He was just looking at her the way anyone looks at another person. Like she was simply there. Simply real. Do you want to play something? He asked. The words landed strangely. Vyra turned them over in her mind, half convinced she had misheard them. No one ever asks me that, she said before she could stop herself. Sam looked at her. Not with pity. Not with surprise. He just looked at her the same way he had been looking at her since he sat down, steady and calm, like what she had just said made complete sense and also changed nothing. Well, he said simply, I'm asking now. Vyra did not know what to say. She had spent so long building walls around herself, small quiet careful walls, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like when someone walked up to one and knocked. She looked out at the courtyard. The other children were all busy with their own games. No one was watching. No one would even notice. She looked back at Sam. Okay, she said. It was only one word. But it felt like the heaviest and the lightest word she had ever said at the same time. Sam stood up and brushed the dirt off his jacket. He held out a hand to help her up, completely unbothered by her claws. She took it carefully, and he pulled her to her feet like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Across her dull green scales, so faint that she did not even notice it herself, a small shimmer of gold passed through like the first warm light of a morning that had taken a very long time to arrive. She noticed nothing. But the wall noticed. And the old stone remembered. Sam explained the rules of the game in about 30 seconds. It was a simple chasing game. One person was the chaser. Everyone else ran. If the chaser tagged you, you became the new chaser. That was it. No complicated rules. No special equipment. Just running and laughing and trying not to get caught. Vyra listened carefully like it was instructions for something very important. Do you understand? Sam asked. Yes, she said. Then after a pause, I have never played a chasing game before. Sam looked at her. Never. No one ever invited me. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away somewhere. Then he pointed at her and grinned. Okay. You're the chaser first. Vyra blinked. Why me? Because you have the longest legs. She looked down at her legs. Then she looked at his. He was not wrong. Sam took 3 large steps back, watching her with bright, ready eyes. Vyra crouched slightly, unsure of herself, unsure of her own body in this new situation. She had spent so long trying to take up less space that using her full size felt almost wrong. Go! Sam shouted, and sprinted left. Vyra ran after him. She was fast. Much faster than she expected. Her legs covered the ground in long powerful strides and Sam yelped and cut right to avoid her. She followed him around the edge of the courtyard, her tail swinging wide behind her, her wings pressing flat against her back. Children nearby looked up from their games. A few stepped out of the way quickly as she thundered past. Sam ducked behind a bench. Vyra leapt clean over it. He burst out laughing even as he ran. That's not fair, you can jump. You did not say I could not jump, she called back, and there was something in her voice that had not been there before. Something bright and breathless and almost like joy. She chased him in a wide arc back toward the open grass. Sam was fast for a human boy, but Vyra was gaining. She reached out to tag him and her foot caught a raised root in the ground. She stumbled, caught herself, but the sudden lurch knocked loose the careful control she always kept over her breath. A short sharp burst of flame came out of her mouth. It hit the grass in front of her. A small patch, no bigger than a dinner plate, turned black and smoking in less than a second. Vyra froze. The whole courtyard seemed to go quiet. She straightened up slowly, staring at the scorched patch of grass, her chest tight with dread. This was it. This was the moment. The moment where everything went back to the way it always was. Where the other children pointed and backed away and the teachers came over with worried faces and Vyra was reminded, gently but clearly, that she was different in ways that made people uncomfortable. She waited for it. Instead, she heard Sam. He had stopped running. He was standing a few feet away, looking at the scorched patch of grass with wide eyes. Then he looked at Vyra. Then back at the grass. Then he burst out laughing. Properly, fully, completely. The kind of laugh that bends a person in half. He started, then laughed again. You just breathed fire at the ground. Vyra stared at him. It was an accident, she said carefully. I know. He was still laughing. That's what makes it so good. Something loosened in Vyra's chest. She did not know what to do with this reaction. She had prepared herself for concern, for distance, for quiet disapproval. She had not prepared for someone finding it genuinely funny. Not mean funny. Not laughing at her funny. Just honestly, warmly, delightedly funny. The corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. It happens sometimes, she said. When I lose focus. Does it happen a lot? Only when I am running. She paused. Or laughing. Or surprised. Sam wiped his eyes. So basically always. Basically, she admitted. And then Vyra smiled. A small, careful, real smile. The kind that had not visited her face in a very long time. They stood there for a moment, the two of them, beside a small patch of scorched earth in the middle of the courtyard. Then Sam pointed past her shoulder and said, "We've got an audience." Vyra turned. Two children had drifted close while they were not looking. One was a small elf boy with large curious eyes and grass stains on both knees. The other was a quiet beastkin girl with soft brown fur and a cautious expression, like someone who very much wanted something but was not sure if she was allowed to want it. The elf boy pointed at the scorched patch of grass. Did she do that? Yes, Sam said proudly, like it was a great achievement. Can she do it again? Sam looked at Vyra. Vyra looked at Sam. Probably not on purpose, she said honestly. The elf boy grinned. His name, he announced immediately, was Pip. The beastkin girl said her name was Dora in a very small voice while looking mostly at her own feet. Do you want to play? Sam asked them. He said it the same way he had said it to Vyra that morning. Easy. Simple. Like the answer was obviously going to be yes. Pip was already bouncing on his heels. What are you playing? Chasing game. Vyra's the chaser. Pip looked at Vyra. At her long legs. At her tail. At the scorched grass. He seemed to do a very quick calculation in his head. I want to be the chaser, he said. You have to earn it, Sam told him. You have to get tagged first. Pip accepted this logic immediately and took off running in a random direction for no clear reason. Sam chased after him, waving at Vyra and Dora to follow. Dora looked at Vyra. Vyra looked at Dora. He's a bit loud, Dora said quietly. Yes, Vyra agreed. But he seems nice. He does. Dora took a small breath and then started running. Vyra followed. For the rest of that lunch break, the four of them ran and chased and laughed across the courtyard. Vyra scorched the grass 2 more times. Pip tripped over his own feet once and did a full roll across the ground and came up still laughing. Dora turned out to be surprisingly fast for her size and tagged Sam 3 times in a row, which made him deeply competitive in the best possible way. Nobody drifted away. Nobody moved to the edges. The circle did not shrink. It grew. When the bell rang, Vyra was breathing hard and her scales felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with the sun. Sam fell into step beside her as they walked back toward the building. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. She looked at him. "You want to play again tomorrow?" "Every day if you want." She nodded once, not trusting herself to say too much. That evening Vyra walked home through the quiet streets with her satchel on her back and her eyes on the ground ahead. She was not drawing shapes in her mind. She was not replaying moments of loneliness or tallying up small hurts the way she usually did on the walk home. She was thinking about Pip rolling across the grass. About Dora's quiet voice. About the scorched patch of earth and Sam laughing like it was the best thing he had ever seen. She did not notice the soft golden shimmer moving slowly across her scales in the evening light. But her mother, waiting at the front door, noticed it immediately. She said nothing. She simply opened her arms. And Vyra walked into them and let herself be held for a long, quiet moment that felt like the beginning of something new. It started small, the way most bad things do. A whisper here. A look there. A group of older children standing a little too close, speaking a little too loudly, making sure certain words carried across the courtyard to the right ears. Vyra noticed it on a Tuesday. She and Sam had arrived at the courtyard together that morning, walking through the gate side by side the way they had started doing every day. Pip was already there, kicking a stone along the path. Dora was sitting on the bench near the fountain, saving spots the way Sam had taught her. It had become their corner of the courtyard. Small but real. Theirs. But that Tuesday, something felt different. 2 younger elf children who had started drifting toward their group the week before were standing further away than usual. They were not looking over with curious eyes anymore. They were looking at the ground, at their feet, anywhere else. One of them glanced toward Vyra for just a moment, and then looked quickly away, like he had been told not to. Vyra noticed. She always noticed these things. She had spent enough time being avoided to recognize the exact shape of it. She said nothing. She sat down and waited for the day to begin. The name behind it all was Gareth. He was older, maybe 2 years above Sam and Vyra, with sharp elf features and the kind of easy confidence that came from always having a group around him. He was not the sort of boy who shouted or caused obvious trouble. He was smarter than that. He worked quietly, through suggestions and raised eyebrows and carefully placed words, and by the time anyone thought to question him the damage was already done. Vyra first heard what he had been saying through Dora, who told her in a very small and unhappy voice during lunch that same Tuesday. Gareth had been telling children that Vyra was dangerous. That firebloods, which was the word he used for dragonkind, had no real control over their fire. He said it was only a matter of time before someone got hurt. He said Sam was foolish for spending time with her, and that anyone else who joined their group was taking a risk that was not worth taking. He had not said any of this loudly. He had not said it where teachers could hear. He had said it in corners and doorways and on the edges of conversations, and it had spread the way quiet things spread, slowly, thoroughly, and very hard to undo. Dora looked at Vyra carefully when she finished telling her. "I don't believe him," she said. "I just thought you should know." Vyra nodded. Her face was still. Her scales had gone flat and dull again without her realizing it. That afternoon, Gareth walked past their group on the way to the far field. He did not stop. He did not say anything directly to Vyra or Sam. He just slowed down slightly as he passed and said to the boy walking beside him, loudly enough, "The fire blood scorched the grass again this morning. Somebody's going to get burned before the year is out." His friend laughed. They kept walking. Pip went red in the face and looked like he very much wanted to say something. Dora put her hand on his arm. Sam said nothing. He watched Gareth walk away with calm, steady eyes. Then he turned back to his lunch like nothing had happened. But Vyra had gone very quiet. Over the next few days, the edges of their group thinned. The two younger elf children stopped coming over entirely. A beastkin boy who had been joining their games occasionally started sitting somewhere else. Nobody said anything mean directly. They just quietly disappeared, one at a time, the way they always had, and Vyra recognized every single step of it because she had lived it before. She started arriving at the courtyard a little earlier again. Sitting a little closer to the wall. Sam noticed. He did not say anything at first. He just showed up every morning the same as always, sat beside her the same as always, waved Pip and Dora over the same as always. He did not make a big thing of it. He did not give speeches. He just kept showing up, steady and unchanged, like Gareth's words were weather that had passed through and left no mark on him at all. But Vyra could not let it go the way Sam could. On a grey Friday morning, when the courtyard was quieter than usual and Pip had gone to the bathroom and Dora was not yet there, Vyra turned to Sam and said what she had been holding for a week. "You should stop sitting with me." Sam looked at her. "No. Gareth is telling people to stay away from you because of me. You've already lost people from the group. It's going to get worse before it gets better." She kept her voice flat and careful. "I don't want that for you." "I know what you want," Sam said. "But I'm not moving." "Sam." Her voice was quiet but serious. "I mean it. You're new here. You could still sit with anyone. You could still have a different group, a bigger group, people who won't cause you problems. I don't want to be the reason your year here is harder than it needs to be." Sam was quiet for a moment. He looked out across the courtyard. He looked at the spot where the younger elf children used to stand. He looked at the far field where Gareth was now playing with his group, laughing at something, completely unbothered. Then he looked back at Vyra. "Can I tell you something?" he said. She waited. "Back in my old village," he said, "there was a boy who everyone liked. Popular, funny, always had people around him. I used to sit near his group sometimes because it felt safer than sitting alone. But I was never actually part of it. I was just nearby. There's a difference." He picked up a small stone and turned it over in his hand. "What we have here, you and me and Pip and Dora, that's real. Gareth's group out there, where everybody just follows along because they're afraid of being left out, that's not real." Vyra said nothing. "I'm not sitting here because I feel sorry for you," Sam continued. His voice was calm and plain and very clear. "I'm not sitting here because I think you need protecting or because it makes me feel like a good person. I'm sitting here because I like you. Because you're funny and honest and you breathe fire when you trip over and you draw the same circle in the dirt 100 times when you're thinking. Those are the reasons." He put the stone down. "Pity doesn't look like this. This is just friendship." Vyra looked at him for a long moment. Something behind her eyes was working very hard to stay steady. "Gareth isn't going to stop," she said finally. "Probably not," Sam agreed. "It might get worse." "It might," he said simply. "But I'll still be here." The courtyard was quiet around them. In the distance, Pip came running back from the building, shouting something about losing his shoe. Dora was walking through the gate with her bag over both shoulders the way she always carried it. Vyra looked down at the dirt. She did not draw a circle this time. She just sat with the warmth of what Sam had said and let it settle slowly into all the cold places that Gareth's words had tried to fill. It was not a perfect morning. But it was hers. And Sam was still sitting beside her. The notice went up on a Wednesday morning. It was pinned to the big wooden board near the front entrance of the academy, and by the time the first bell rang, nearly every student had already pushed past someone else to read it. The paired challenge was coming. End of the month. Mandatory for all students. Pairs drawn at random. Vyra read it twice and felt a quiet dread settle in her stomach. The paired challenge was the Academy's biggest yearly event. It was not a test you could study for. It was a course set up across the school grounds, puzzles, physical barriers, traps, obstacles, and every pair had to work through it together from start to finish. You could not complete it alone. That was the whole point. One person's strength covered the other person's weakness, and together you either made it through or you did not. The results were posted publicly. Everyone saw who finished and who did not. Everyone saw the times. Vyra had no memory of enjoying the paired challenge. Last year she had been placed with a dwarf boy who spent the entire course 3 steps ahead of her, refusing to look back, completing whatever he could on his own and waiting at each station with his arms crossed while she caught up. They finished near the bottom. He had not spoken a word to her the whole time. She tried not to think about it. The pair drawings happened the following Monday in the main hall. Ms. Lena stood at the front with a wooden box full of folded names and called them out one by one. Students shuffled and nodded and looked across the room at their partners with expressions ranging from pleased to horrified. Vyra sat with her hands in her lap and waited. Sam, Ms. Lena called, paired with Vyra. The hall shifted. It was not loud. It was not one big reaction. It was a collection of small ones, a few heads turning, a few quiet murmurs, someone near the back whispering to the person beside them. Enough to feel. Enough to land. From 3 rows back, Gareth laughed. It was short and quiet and perfectly timed, the kind of laugh designed to make something feel ridiculous without being loud enough to get you in trouble. A few people near him smiled uncertainly. Vyra kept her eyes forward. Her scales had gone flat. Her hands were still in her lap. Sam turned around in his seat, found her face across the room, and gave her a small nod. Nothing dramatic. Just a nod, calm and steady, the same way he did everything. Like being paired with her was simply fine. Like it was, in fact, exactly what he would have chosen. Vyra breathed out slowly. They had 2 weeks to prepare. Sam took the preparation seriously in a way that surprised her. He got a copy of the previous year's course description from the Academy records room and spread it out on the courtyard bench the next morning. He went through each station carefully, asking Vyra questions about what she could do, what she was confident in, what she found difficult. She was not used to being asked those questions. She answered carefully at first, watching his face for signs that her answers were too much or too strange. He wrote everything down in a small notebook. "You're stronger than most students here," he said, not as a compliment, just as a fact he was noting. "And faster. And you can fly short distances." "Small distances," she corrected. "My wings are not full grown. Still useful." He drew a small map of the course stages. "There are 2 barrier stations that need raw strength to clear. Those are yours. The puzzle stations need patience and clear thinking. Those are mine. The water trap at the end is the one nobody ever solves quickly. How do we solve it?" He looked at her. Then he looked at her breath. "What temperature can you hold your flame at?" She blinked. Nobody had ever asked her that before either. They practiced every lunch break for 2 weeks. Not loudly or showily. Just quietly and consistently, working through problems together, learning how the other person thought, learning when to step forward and when to wait. Pip cheered them on from the bench. Dora timed them with a small clock she borrowed from the classroom. By the morning of the challenge, Vyra felt something she did not fully recognize at first. Then she placed it. She felt ready. The course ran through the back grounds of the academy. All the student pairs lined up at the starting mark. The elder who oversaw the event explained the rules one final time. Each pair would be released at 2-minute intervals. The clock ran from the moment you stepped across the line. Sam and Vyra were called forth. As they moved to the start, Gareth, already waiting with his partner, said something quietly to the boy beside him. His partner looked at Vyra and pressed his lips together to stop from smiling. Vyra heard it. She did not look over. She fixed her eyes on the course ahead. Sam stepped up beside her. "You ready?" "Yes," she said. The signal sounded. They moved. The first station was a puzzle wall. A series of locks and sliding bolts arranged in a pattern that only opened when solved in the right sequence. Sam was in front of it before Vyra had finished reading it. His hands moved quickly and confidently, trying combinations, backing up when something did not work, adjusting without frustration. Vyra watched the overall pattern while he worked the details. "Third bolt first," she said quietly. He tried it. The first lock clicked open. They were through in less than 2 minutes. The barrier stations were stone and iron gates, sealed with heavy mechanisms that required direct force to break open. Sam pulled and twisted but the mechanism did not move. Vyra stepped in front of him, set her feet, gripped the iron, and pushed. The gate shrieked against the ground and swung open. Sam was already moving through before the dust settled. They found their rhythm quickly. No wasted time. No confusion about who did what. Just two people who knew each other well enough to move like one. The water trap was last. A wide channel of deep water blocked the final path, with no bridge, no stepping stones, and sides too smooth to climb. Past students had spent 10, 15, 20 minutes at this station. Some pairs had simply swum through and finished soaked and exhausted. Sam looked at Vyra. Vyra looked at the water. She breathed in slowly. She focused the way she had practiced, pulling the heat down to a careful, controlled stream. She breathed out across the surface of the water, steady and measured, not a burst but a flow. The water steamed. The level dropped. Slowly, then faster, a path appeared, not dry, but shallow enough to cross. They walked through together. They crossed the finish line and the timekeeper looked at his board and then looked at them and then looked at his board again. First place. By a wide margin. The courtyard was silent for one long moment. Then Pip screamed from somewhere in the crowd. Then Dora clapped hard and fast. Then more voices joined, building from the edges inward, students who had watched the whole thing and could not pretend they had not seen what they had just seen. Vyra stood at the finish line breathing hard, her scales catching the afternoon light and throwing it back in deep, warm gold. She looked out at the crowd. At the faces turned toward her. Not away from her. Toward her. Gareth was standing near the back. He was not laughing. He was not saying anything to the boy beside him. He was looking at the ground with the particular expression of someone who has run out of words. Sam appeared beside Vyra, equally out of breath, and nudged her arm with his elbow. "Told you," he said simply. Vyra said nothing. But she was smiling. Fully, freely, without being careful about it at all. The last day of the school year arrived the way last days always do. Too quickly and not quickly enough at the same time. Vyra woke up that morning earlier than usual. She lay in her bed for a while, looking at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house waking up around her. Her mother moving quietly in the kitchen below. The early birds outside the window. The particular stillness of a morning that knows it means something. She got up and dressed slowly. She stood in front of the small mirror on her wall and looked at herself the way she rarely did. Her scales were not dull this morning. They had not been dull in a long time now. They were deep green and warm, catching the light from the window and holding it, and underneath the green there was a soft steady gold that had become as natural to her as breathing. She remembered the girl who used to sit by the stone wall every morning and draw circles in the dirt. She barely recognized her. Her mother Sarah called up from the kitchen that breakfast was ready. Vyra picked up her satchel, took one last look at the mirror, and went downstairs. Sarah had made a proper breakfast. Not the quick kind they usually had on school mornings but a slow, full, warm one. She set it on the table without making a fuss about it and sat across from Vyra and asked how she was feeling about the day. "Good," Vyra said. Then she thought about it more honestly. "Strange. Good and strange." Sarah nodded like that made perfect sense. That is exactly how last days feel. They ate together in comfortable quiet. Sarah did not ask too many questions. She had learned over the course of this year when to speak and when to simply be present, and this was a morning for being present. When Vyra finished and stood up to go, Sarah held the front door open for her and touched her daughter's face briefly with one hand. "I am proud of you," she said simply. "Not for the challenge or the results or anything like that. Just for who you have become this year." Vyra nodded. She did not trust herself to say too much. She walked to school in the warm morning air. The academy was already busy when she arrived. The last day had a different energy to it, louder, lighter, looser, like everyone had silently agreed to put down the weight of the year and simply exist in the last few hours of it. Children were signing each other's notebooks and trading small gifts and making loud promises to meet up over the summer that some of them would keep and some of them would not. Vyra walked through the gate and Pip spotted her immediately. He came running over at full speed the way he always did, slightly uncoordinated, talking before he had even reached her. He had brought small folded notes for everyone in the group with a drawing inside that he had made himself. He pressed one into Vyra's hands before she could say a word. She opened it. Inside was a small drawing of 4 figures running across a courtyard, one of them with a tail, a tiny scorch mark on the grass beneath her feet. Underneath it Pip had written in his messy handwriting, "Best team. Best year." Vyra stared at it for a moment. "It's not very good," Pip said, suddenly uncertain. "It is perfect," Vyra said firmly. Dora arrived a few minutes later and the 4 of them spent the last free morning moving through the school together, loud and easy and belonging. They went to the hall, to the courtyard, to the back field where the challenge course had been set up and then taken down, leaving only flattened grass and the memory of what had happened there. Nobody avoided Vyra anymore. Not in the way they used to. Some children still kept their distance out of habit or shyness, but the open avoidance was gone. The whispers were gone. Even Gareth, who passed them near the water fountain that morning, said nothing. He looked briefly at Vyra and then looked away and kept walking, and that was all. It was a small thing. But it was different from before, and different was enough. At midday the whole school gathered in the great hall for the closing assembly. The hall was full and warm and smelled like wood and chalk and the particular dusty warmth of a building that had held many years of children. Students sat in rows by year group. Teachers lined the walls. At the front, behind the wide wooden podium, stood the elder. He was an old tortoise-kin, slow and deliberate in everything he did, with deep calm eyes and a voice that always sounded like it was in no hurry to get anywhere. He had led the academy for longer than most of the parents of the current students had been alive. He spoke rarely at assemblies and when he did, people listened. He looked out at the hall for a long moment before he began. He spoke about the year. About what the academy was for, not just lessons and knowledge, but about learning to live alongside people who were different from you. About how easy it was to stay inside your own circle and how much harder and how much more worthwhile it was to step outside it. Then he said something that made the hall go very quiet. He said that true courage did not always look like something big. He said that sometimes courage looked like a child crossing a courtyard. Walking towards someone sitting alone. Sitting down. Asking a simple question. He did not say any names. He did not look in any particular direction. But half the hall looked at Sam. Sam stared at his shoes. Vyra, sitting 2 rows behind him, felt something move through her chest that was too big and too warm to fit into words. She looked at the back of Sam's head, at his hair still sticking up slightly on one side the way it always did, and she thought about that first morning. The gray sky. The worn satchel. The boy who sat down beside her without asking permission and asked what she was drawing. She thought about everything that had grown from that one small moment. After the assembly, the students poured out into the afternoon sun. The gates were opened and families began arriving, gathering their children, filling the entrance with noise and color and the particular joyful chaos of a school year finally ending. Sarah stood at the gate. She saw Vyra before Vyra saw her. She saw her daughter come through the main doors surrounded by 3 other children, all of them talking at once, all of them laughing at something Pip had said or done. She saw Vyra throw her head back and laugh freely, openly, without checking herself. She saw the gold light moving across her scales in the warm afternoon sun, rich and steady and unguarded. Sarah put her hand over her mouth. She had waited a long time to see her daughter look like this. Like she belonged somewhere. Like the world had made room for her and she had stopped apologizing for taking up space in it. She composed herself quickly before Vyra looked over and spotted her. Vyra said something to the group, touched Dora's arm briefly, pointed toward Sam who was heading for the side gate. She peeled off from the group and crossed the yard to where he was pulling his satchel onto his shoulder. Sam. He turned. She stood in front of him and took a breath. She had thought about what she wanted to say. She had practiced it in her head during the assembly, through the whole last hour of the day. But now that she was standing here, all the careful words she had prepared felt too small for what she actually meant. She said it simply instead. You have no idea what that first day meant to me. When you just came and sat down. When you just asked. She paused. I had stopped expecting that from anyone. I had stopped hoping for it. And you just did it like it was nothing. Sam looked at her. His expression was the same open, unbothered look he had worn since the very first morning. Like none of this was complicated. Like it never had been. It wasn't nothing, he said quietly. I just didn't want to eat lunch alone either. Vyra laughed. A short, warm, surprised laugh. You are so strange, she said. Probably, he agreed. He adjusted his satchel strap. Same spot next year. She looked at him. At this boy who had walked through a gate one gray morning with his hair sticking up and his jacket too big and had changed everything simply by sitting down. Same spot, she said. He nodded once and headed for the gate, raising a hand over his shoulder as he went. Vyra watched him go and then turned and walked back toward her mother. Sarah opened her arms without a word. Vyra walked into them and let herself be held in the warm afternoon light, in the noise and color of the end of a year that had begun so quietly and grown into something she had not dared to imagine. Her scales glowed soft and gold all the way home. Not because anything dramatic had happened. Not because she had won something or proved something or defeated anyone. But because she was known. She was chosen. She was loved. And she had stopped drawing the same circle in the dirt. She had learned, at last, to step outside it.